Stu's a man of honor, in my opinion. When I saw his video clip, I recognized immediately that he was going to be in big trouble with the United States military, specifically the Marine Corps, for standing up against the chain of command, for making decisions and doing things that, in my opinion, warrant resignation or worse. The wrong person got punished. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring Stu here to New Hampshire and lay out several venues in order for him to share his experience. Because we have veterans here, we have those that have served in conflicts that were not popular. When you look at our history, the military senior leadership, whether it's civilian or military, or both, at the senior levels, don't have a very good track record of winning. Right? And so there are some in here who have sons in the military, daughters in the military, those that are serving, grandchildren. It's incumbent upon you to be aware of the shortcomings of leadership and how that undermines our national security, because it does. And I suggest that people in Washington, D.C. at this point, making these decisions, have really no idea what they're doing. And it's hurting our nation. And more importantly, it's ruining young men and women's lives, particularly the ones that are getting arbitrarily thrown out with other than honorable discharges for not wanting to get the vaccine. I mean, it's terrible. Right? I think it's terrible whether you're pro-vaccine or not, right? There's no operational requirement for it. You can't convince me that there is. I've been in a tremendous amount of operational environments. I've taken my share of, being the wrong side of the pincushion, right, throughout my 33 years in the military. So I kind of know, right, what the deal is and what is operational is not. I've commanded men and women in global environments in many places in Africa, and we don't have a vaccine for that. And we don't not do our missions because we're in the war. We continue to do our missions. We take precautions, we mitigate, and we move forward. And that's the way we should be. And that's the spirit of America, but that's not what we're doing now. But anyways, I brought Stu here so that he could share some of his experiences with you and his perspective, which I think is fascinating. And I think that you will really get some insight here. I was one to always default to my subordinates and taking care of them and making sure my organization was being taken care of. And if that meant getting crossways with my bosses at the 3- and 4-star level, that's what it meant. Because they're the ones that do the mission. They're the ones that are important. They're the ones that we should be recognizing a lot more than what we're doing, and certainly a lot more than general officers and admirals that we seem to hold in the highest regards and kind of forget, right, really who does the work in the military. So, without any further ado, I will pass this off to Lieutenant Colonel Stu Scheller, a friend.
Thank you. Yeah. So, for those of you that don't know me, Stu Scheller, I was a Marine infantry officer for 17 years, and when I came in, when I went into Iraq, I just wanted to serve. I joined the military because I wanted to leave America in a better place. I didn't have children back then, but for the next generation. Went on to have 3 sons. I never wanted to be a career military officer. I just wanted to serve my country, but there's always like a reason to stay in. I love the Marines. I wanted to serve. I wanted to go to Iraq. I wanted to go to Afghanistan. But I didn't fully comprehend how the desire to serve can be manipulated by people with alternative motives. I watched Black Hawk Down, the movie 100 times when I was an adolescent, because running through the streets of Somalia just seemed glorious. It glorified combat to me. And it wasn't until I got my master's in military science and studied foreign diplomacy pretty thoroughly that I realized the operational breakdowns of Somalia and no one being held accountable were just, it really struck me. You just go through our history, really starting with Vietnam, where we kind of got off course with not holding senior leaders accountable. You could just go through all the smaller campaigns, whether it's Kosovo, whether it's Libya, whether it's Somalia, whether it's Syria, whether it's Libya. It's just it's the same pattern playing over and over. And you know, I was a regimental OPSO. I put 1-8 out on deployment as a regimental OPSO. That's the first unit that responded to the Kabul airfield. I knew all the company commanders. I knew the battalion commander personally. 1-8 was my first unit. I was in Ramadi with them. My best friend was blown up with a suicide vest. I spent months in Walter Reed with him. He ended up a year later taking his knee off above the knee so that he could walk. So it's just very personal to me, right? So I tried to not be emotional and be objective and rational, but it's very hard to divorce yourself from the emotional aspect of it. I spent my whole life dedicated to this cause, and I kind of saw the direction that general officers were taking it. They're already talking about force design, maturing the force, revamping the junior service member, which is very similar to the narrative post-Vietnam, where it's drugs, draft, we need to reform the junior enlisted, but they don't go back and talk about places like Khe Sanh, where thousands died because it was a strategically important piece of terrain, and then all of a sudden it wasn't, and no one was held accountable for that. And you could just, I could go on all day about these mistakes that I've seen, and if you want to talk to me after this, I can talk your ear off. The bottom line is this wasn't something that I hadn't thought through, but it still was a very difficult decision for me. I made a video where I demanded accountability. I watched real time, same as all of you, when we're talking the Afghanistan evacuation. They planned it from April to September. Anyone that served in Afghanistan knows the Taliban hides in the mountains during the winter. We could have done the evacuation from September to April and been unmolested by the Taliban. But we risked American lives and resources because of a PR date of September 11th. We abandoned Bagram Air Base. The key general, General McKenzie, indecisively waited 2 months. Most people don't even know that. His senior planners planned on the evacuation out of Bagram Air Base all the way up till June. And then indecisively, he decided to pull it off the table. A month later, we evacuated. We leave 7,000 prisoners in the prison. Imagine getting 3 meals a day, and then all of a sudden, your prison guard isn't there. We don't tell the Afghan National Security Force that we're leaving. Taliban walks up unopposed, releases 7,000 prisoners, to include the suicide bomber. I don't know that definitively, but I'm assuming. Then they walk up to Kabul, 15 August. We had gone from 2,500 troops to 650 without evacuating any American citizens. We realized the mistakes we've made. We throw 5,000 troops at the problem. One of them was my first unit. We have to rely on the Taliban for external security at this point. The generals are talking about how they were such a great partner. We got in multiple firefights. Some of them are documented in the investigation. Most of them are not. Some of that's going to come out. I know a couple guys that are about to retire that have a lot to say. And then we have a suicide bomb attack, kills 13 service members, hundreds of other people. So in response to that, we conduct a drone strike. We kill nothing but women and children. And then the President and the Secretary of Defense and General McKenzie talk about what an overwhelming success the evacuation was, right? I mean, it was very hard for me. So I made a video demanding accountability, which I thought was the right thing. It was very hard. If you go back and watch that video, I articulated I knew I was risking my job, my retirement, my family stability. I didn't post it right away. It was one of those things where I drove home and I understood the implication of it. But I just knew if I slept on it that I never would have done it. You know, it's like one of those things, the more you think about it, the more you can think yourself out of it. So I just decided I spent my whole life doing this. We're going to keep repeating the same mistakes. You know, if not me, who? If not now, when? And so I made that first video. And I never intended to resign. I never intended to make more than that first video. But then there was just this disproportionate reaction to my statement. And I was relieved within 12 hours. My honor was questioned by former bosses, like on social media, without anyone calling me. No one ever called to check on me. And so then I continued to make statements and push back. They questioned my mental health. I missed the death of every one of my grandparents while on a deployment. My grandfather served in World War II, landed at the beaches of Normandy, very influential to me, missed his death. I missed the birth of my first son in Afghanistan. My mental health was never challenged under any of those. All the people that I killed, mental health never challenged. When I questioned senior military leadership, I was forced to go to a mental health hospital to try and be admitted, right? Got out of that. Now I was just furious. And so then the divide was too deep. I resigned. I made a couple more statements. They put me under a gag order. That gag order lasted for 4 months until they finally kicked me out. And then I actually made a statement to violate the gag order because I knew the general officers were going to testify to Congress on a Tuesday, Wednesday, respectively. At this point, I mean, I was all in. So I challenged their gag order. They threw me in jail, and I watched on the news while I was in jail them talking about me. It was a pretty weird moment in my life. But the play there, the thought was, Congress has to be able to hold these generals accountable. And apolitically, they went through and they talked about their soundbites of anger, the failure of Afghanistan. Every one of them had their chance to say it. But then what happened? Nothing, right? And so what I understood, that not a lot of other people understood, is the lever that Congress has over the DoD is the budget. They control the purse strings. And concurrently, at the exact same time they were having their soundbites of anger, they approved the largest DoD budget ever, $750 billion, and not a single one of them had the courage, even though they were vocally outraged for a camera shot, to say, hey, you guys obviously messed this up. I mean, I just went through a list of terrible decisions. You want $750 billion. Who's responsible for the $50 billion you left for the Taliban? Right? I mean, it's just common sense. But not a single one of them did that, because to do that, someone could spin it as you're not for the service member, right? You're not for the military. And that fear to go against their self-preservation was too much, and none of them had the courage to do what needed to be done. So through this whole ordeal for me, not a single Marine Corps general officer called me, reached out just to ask about my mental health, ask about how I was doing. And there was one guy who reached out to my parents, a former general officer, and it was actually Don Bolduc. I had never met the guy, and he was calling my parents and consoling them and giving them advice. And so when he was doing that, then I started researching him, and I found an op-ed article from February 2021. You can Google it, it's still out there. And it's a dated historical record which shows the only general officer that I can find 10 deployments to Afghanistan. And he talked about, even as a general officer, I am culpable for these failures. We need to stop lionizing the generals and lionize the junior service members, which was exactly the platform, exactly what I was saying. So I found this man, and then I had connections of people that I worked with in MARSOC that had served with him, had nothing but good things to say about him. And the more I started following him, I just thought, everything I've done in my life, in my professional career, is to leave America a better place for my 3 sons. And it would have been very easy to not make those statements and enjoy my retirement and my stability, but my 3 sons probably wouldn't have had a better future had I done that. And I'm worried about the direction of America, and right now I see problems on both political parties. What we need is people with courage. What we need is people that, despite their soundbite of anger, can actually do something about it. I don't care about what you say, I care about what you do. And I believe in Don Bolduc, and I believe that he is going to be one of those people that's actually going to do something. And so I'm out here supporting people like him. And it's an important time. And what's really funny right now is the establishment people with their millions of dollars, most of Americans are getting fed up of it. And I think we're finding people like Don Bolduc, and I really do believe there's a change coming that transcends political party, and it gets more back to the constitutional roots and the things that we stand for. So, Don, I'm happy to support you. Thanks for having me here.
God bless you, my friend. Your book?
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget the book.
I forget that every time. So, I wrote a book. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be really good. It's I go over so my whole career has been in the military during a time of war. So like all the famous generals that we've lionized, whether it's Mattis, who really saw combat once he was a colonel, and then took the job at General Dynamics, became a Secretary of Defense, went right back to General Dynamics. And there's a generation like me that has literally been in just during time of war. And I've watched how we've gotten away from a warfighting focus. So half the book is me describing macro trends over the last 2 decades, but then I go into the micro story of what happened to me after I posted that video to kind of drive home some of those macro trends through a personal, real, raw story. And I think it's going to be a pretty big deal. I'm excited about it. Don's one of the 5 people I asked to endorse it. And it's called Crisis of Command. So you can pre-order it on Amazon now. It's picked up by a major publisher, so it'll be in all the stores. But you can pre-order it on Amazon now. It comes out into August. So my future, I'm really coming into August, I'm just going to be on a book tour. So I hit the news channels pretty hard in January, February I'll be back on the news in August, September, promoting the book, and then I'll probably start another round of conversations. And then after that, hopefully we see people in November like Don Bolduc going up there to make a change. So.
We'll come back here for our primary.
There we go.
Primary, yeah.
How about any questions? Anybody want to ask him any questions about something that you may have heard him say, or something you heard in the news? Or... There you go.
What did
Paul.
your closest friends, your peers, the guys you trusted, after your video went out, when they called you, what did they say? Like, right on, or holy crap,
Yeah.
let's see what happens?
This is a good question. So when I first posted the video, my peers and subordinates reached out to me and said a variety of reasons. It's all the same thing though. Stu, everything you said is right, but it's going to come at too high of a personal cost. Take the video down. And it was like, hey man, I hear what you're saying, but this is something I truly believe in. I'm not taking it down. This is a hill I'm dying on. I had a gunny that I was a battalion commander at the time. Said, hey sir, all the guys love you. Everything you said is right, but these statements are going to be used by our enemies and picked up by China and worked against us. And I said, gunny, I love all you instructors, but if we can't address our own internal failures, worrying about whoever the next enemy is actually misguided. We have to fix like what is going on here, and no one else is saying it. So I'm not taking it down. And so these, imagine 100 texts or phone calls similar to that, but no one from my chain of command called me. And then the next day I went into work. I was relieved for a loss of trust and confidence. And then when I got the investigation back, it was tough because a lot of my peers that didn't know me, and so they didn't really interview my friends of the Marines that served under me, just adjacent lieutenant colonels, and it was just like personal attacks, right? So I smiled in my command photo because I think people deserve a leader that shows positive energy. But there's an unwritten rule in the Marine Corps or in the military in general that you take like a command photo and you like look angry. And so they attacked that. They're like, he's a narcissist because he smiled in his command photo. That was a direct quote. One person talked about how I abandoned my family and I was a terrible father. One person, so they said all these things. What doesn't matter. I was like, and that's probably was the hardest thing, was like take the knife out of my back. But I'm a pretty mentally tough guy, right? So I sat on all these comments, and then I waited. So once I got out of jail, they court-martialed me. So I didn't respond to any of them until my court-martial. I didn't want it to be used against me. I waited until my court-martial was done. And the day my court-martial finished, I literally drove from the courthouse back to my condo, and I had pre-wrote responses to every one of these guys. And I didn't have to like even be emotional. It was just like, you said boom, 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 boom. I was at your house last week. Never said any of that. Hope Julie and the kids are good. Sent, right? So you just go through and you just illustrate that each one of them said that. You don't have to even say anything. And then, this is a good story. So then I had to keep coming into work. Like they kept making me come into work. So I came into work the next day, and one of those lieutenant colonels was an adjacent battalion commander. And it was one of those situations where I pull in and he pulls in, and we both like see each other. And I had already texted him like everything I just said. And so I get out of my truck, and we're wearing masks then. So I have a mask on and my cover, so all you can see is like my eyes. And I'm walking, and he gets out of his truck, and he's like fumbling in his back seat, like obviously like pretending to do something so he doesn't have to deal with me. And so it was like one of those moments where I could have just kept walking, but I was like, no, like I'm right. So I just stand there like this. And now he's like frustrated because he's like corner's eye. He knows that I'm not moving, right? So he like slams the door, and I'm just like standing there with a mask on, and I'm just like glaring at him. He walks, and then like he gets from like me to you in, and he screams, "Get back!" And I was like looking around like, I'm just standing here, man. And then he scurried away, and that was a moment where I was like, you guys are cowards. And like that guy would probably be a general officer, right? He's a advanced operational planner, right? Everyone thinks the world of him, right? So it's just like, it's so.
You were violating the 6 foot.
Yeah, that's probably what it was. You're probably right. I didn't even think about that. You're right. Yeah. So I mean, to your point. It was just funny. They didn't interview any of the enlisted Marines, and the whole time people kept saying, there's a lot more that's going to come about Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. Like all these motivations, there's a lot we don't know. It's going to come out. Nothing ever came out. Like just think about that. Like no skeletons fell out of my closet. Like all my Marines have great things to say about me. And so it's just like there was this just wanting to see me be this terrible person because they didn't like the methods with which I used, but there just wasn't anything that they could use against me. And so all the attacks in the investigation were just like, we don't like the way you smile. All right, man. But like, that's not really substantiated, like, good stuff, right? Like, there's nothing, I got a great record. I was a, you know, so that's just, I guess that's just a small story to illustrate, like, the field grade officers were very threatened by me.
Well, hats off to you. I've been the subject of more than a few 15-6s myself, and you're right, the IO always finds a way to
Yeah.
interview the people that will build the case,
Oh, yeah.
not the people that'll
So,
undercut the case.
I've never even told this story. So there was when I got relieved, I came back to my office, and my battalion XO was there. And my battalion XO is a major, he comes in, I'm like, hey man, what do you need? I don't need anything, sir. And he goes, I just want to let you know that the Marines think the world of you. Our gunner that just retired called me this morning and said he got out of the Marine Corps because of the direction it was going, and you finally reminded him why he joined the Marine Corps, and we just love you. And I was like, all right, well, thanks for telling me. And he's like, you know, he's like, I'm sorry, I hadn't been relieved yet. The CO told me you got to pack all your shit up and you relieve me after that. So I was like, I think they're going to relieve me. He's like, well, that's bullshit, sir. He's like, it's so political now. He's like, all of these riots and all these social initiatives, and the Joint Chiefs didn't say anything. And then on the January 6th riots, you know, they released a letter saying, I'm condemning it. And they didn't condemn anything else. Like, it's just political. And so then I made the comment, I was like, yeah, January 6th, I don't know, there may have been some bad actors, but really it's an indictment on the Capitol Police if they knew there was a riot and that people just like walk right through there. Like, it seems ridiculous. That was all I said. The investigating officer took that comment and led every witness with, there's another witness that said Lt Col Scheller was talking about the January 6th riots. Can you substantiate any of his activity in the January 6th riots? So like that's how the interview started with everyone, right? Like, it's just so unfair, right? Like, I think I'm on like a January 6th insurrectionist. And it was just, I literally made one offhand comment, like, who hasn't done that? But like, that's the military justice system. And so actually, I put that in my book. So I was just like, you know, man, if you're going to call me out, I put my one friend by name who's just like, and so they're going to get theirs.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it was tough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'll come back to you. Go
A
ahead.
bit more of a comment. First, sorry, I missed your very beginning. Took me a bit longer to get to it than I thought. But having had both the fortune and misfortune, I guess, to grow up under communism, you've experienced the standard tactic of what they do. You say anything they don't like, and there's either re-education or mental health. So you end up either in a nut house or a re-education camp. And so hats off to people like you and the general and others like you for actually having had the courage and the character to stand up and speak out.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. What else? There's a question over here? No? All right. Go ahead, sir.
With your military history, do you believe that Patton was silenced?
I would go 100% yes.
I don't know. I can't answer that one. I'll say that Patton was used very effectively in military deception at World War II. So them sticking up there, and basically the Germans were so fixated on Patton that that's how we pulled off Normandy. And we've lost the ability of military deception, quite honestly, because we just rely on our strengths without using any type of deception. Yeah, there's a lot of theories of Patton there at the end, but I won't offer that. I'll take you in a different direction, but not a question you asked. MacArthur, talking about Korea, so I quite honestly don't think we've won a war since World War II. You could argue Korea was a stalemate, but Korea is a really interesting case study of how the national security establishment worked, because we were stuck in the Pusan perimeter, and this guy MacArthur, we didn't even really have a Secretary of Defense back then. We were creating it with the National Security Act of 44-47 at post-World War II. MacArthur convinced the entire military establishment to do a naval landing at Incheon, right? Which is really incredible. Like, I can't think of a general officer that could convince everyone to do something that the Navy didn't want to do it, and some Army officer convinced them, right? And they do, and they achieve operational surprise. They cut North Koreans in half and do this thing, but then MacArthur was like, I'm going to keep pushing north, and I'm going to use tactical nukes. And then Truman, another military veteran, a World War I Belleau Wood guy, said no. All right, and then they got another scuffle. So like how that whole thing worked out, and I quite honestly agree with how Truman handled that. That's a really interesting. Like, I love looking at Korea, just because I just don't see it really working effectively anymore. Post-Vietnam, the way to address it was we created the Goldwater-Nichols legislation, which is the last time we updated the national security establishment, and all that did was create the combatant commands that further empowered the general officer, and no one's holding the general officers accountable, which has been my whole shtick. And so I kind of answered your question, but not really.
I do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. You're up.
I'm up?
I'm good.
All right.
Croc TV.